He had something in his rider about me bringing caviar for him, beluga caviar, and I tried to explain it's expensive and illegal, but...
Beluga's illegal?
Yeah. It's an endangered animal.
Speaking of illegal endangered animals, marijuana. Is that a bad segue?
Proposition 64. Proposition 64, legalize marijuana for recreational use. I am so high right now.
Super high. We have brought in our good friend and probably the funniest person I know, Tom Knight. Thanks for finally making it on Schmolitics.
That's correct. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Dan, for having me.
Thank Carlos more than me. So Proposition 64 would legalize marijuana in California for anyone over 21 years old. The initiative would hold marijuana to similar standards as tobacco and alcohol products to meet basic packaging, labeling, and advertising requirements to protect and inform consumers.
You said over 21?
Yes.
So nobody that Donald Trump's dating can still smoke weed legally. Great.
That's correct, Carlos.
Great. So, Tom, what do you got for us?
Well, where should we begin?
Let's start. Let's talk supporters. Who's supporting this proposition?
Well, I have found that most of the individual legislators that have come out to support or not support this particular proposition have been more or less split across party lines, with the most notable outlier being Dianne Feinstein, senior senator from California, who has come out strongly opposed to the proposition.
Interesting.
Did she say why?
Her biggest argument, and what seems to be the biggest argument against legalization, is the potential for a rise in driving under the influence related to marijuana, which I think is sort of a sticky icky argument. It doesn't really seem to hold water for me. Obviously, I don't think any responsible adult wants more impaired drivers on the road. But there just doesn't seem to be any concrete evidence to support the claim that that will be the case.
Actually, the AAA Foundation for Highway Safety reported that deaths in marijuana-related car crashes have doubled since Washington approved marijuana legalization, which is why all the sheriffs, every sheriff in California is against this, because they said there's nothing in the law, in the proposition, on DUI for being high, but that's because we don't have the technology to detect someone's level of THC?
That is correct, Dan, and I have taken a look at that study, and the problem, of course, is that unlike alcohol, marijuana, or THC, the active component, metabolizes a little bit differently in a person's system. So when you're talking about accidents, people are tested after their accident, and because the component stays in your blood a lot longer, it would be akin to testing people after they've had a drunk driving related accident, saying maybe they have been under the influence of alcohol within the previous week. Does that make sense?
Interesting, because it stays in your system for so long. So
I think that study does show that maybe more people are using marijuana in Washington State, but not necessarily that more people are driving impaired.
So this is more of a correlation why are there more boating accidents? Or boating? What is it? There's more. I already started, and now I got to follow through.
You got to keep going. Finish it.
There's more boating accidents. Boating accidents increase with ice cream sales.
That's a thing?
That's
right.
It's a correlation.
I know what you're talking about. I've heard that before.
So it's a correlation. It's not because more people are buying ice cream that they're not paying attention to driving their boat. It's that both of them happen during the summer.
I'm writing Ted Kennedy.
I also think that it's a little disingenuous to put such a huge amount of weight on the DUI statistic because, I mean, the technology exists, and it is very cheap technology to prevent any individual anywhere from starting a car if they're under the influence of alcohol. I mean, anybody in California who's convicted of driving under the influence has to have an ignition interlock device installed in their car. Very cheap, very reasonable technology. If everybody was really serious about reducing fatalities on the road and reducing driving under the influence accidents, I mean, we would just make those mandatory for everybody.
And they probably cost like 8 cents if they get built in originally.
It's absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, and so that technology exists, but the fact of the matter is that there's a lot of money that gets put into our legal system by DUI cases.
And speaking of money...
An excellent segue.
Thank you. The fiscal impact is expected to be about $1 billion annually. 200 million of that will be going towards police grants, and the rest will be going to funding after-school programs, drug prevention education, addiction treatment, and research on impaired driving.
And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of that fiscal impact also has to do with saving money on.
They're saying it's about $10 million annually
Right.
saving from the decriminalization of marijuana.
Exactly, prosecuting low-level marijuana offenders.
I like it.
Yeah, I like it too. You know who else likes it is Sean Parker.
I love.
He likes it a lot.
He likes it.
He has put his money where his mouth is.
$2.3 million from Mr. Sean Parker in favor of the Pro 64.
And most of that money came from him illegally streaming, and then I got high,
Oh, well done.
which is great.
Yeah, in terms of the money, it's pretty lopsided here.
I
Tom?
have Mr. Sean Parker as a donor at almost just over $8.5 million of a total of $17 million that's on the Pro 64 campaign. So
This is like the Yankees playing like a farm team from Ohio. Like it's like this is hilarious.
I'm just saying, I thought I had spent a lot of money on marijuana, but it turns out there are people out there who are really, really going hog wild.
Yeah, go.
No, you know what? I've really actually never met someone who was stoned that I was like, yeah. As opposed to there are a lot of angry drunks out there. You know what I mean? That's the way that I correlate it. I don't think that this will do anything but help overall. That's my personal opinion. And for the record, I don't smoke weed. I haven't smoked weed in damn near a decade. So I think it's a no-brainer.
You know, it's important to remember that, like it or not, marijuana culture is such a big part of California culture. I don't think that the legalization of it is going to create a lot of new marijuana smokers, but I think it's going to give the people that choose as adults to exercise that hobby a way to do it safely and while also contributing to the system in a good way. The other big arguments against that the folks against are citing are one, that the absurd notion that this will allow people to cultivate marijuana near schools. I mean, there is language in the bill that says that it can't be sold within 600 feet of a school or a daycare center.
But it doesn't say
like
it can't
that.
be grown.
I mean, if there's a private residence, because this would allow anybody to grow inside their own private residence.
But it's a plant.
Exactly.
And it has to be sold legally. And even if it's sold in the black market, they're doing that now anyway.
Exactly. And then the other big argument, so I don't think that argument holds water. And the other is that there's no language in the bill that would prevent people who have been convicted in the past of drug crimes from participating in the industry. So the
Good, they have experience.
Exactly. Well, the exaggerated argument there is that, all these, cocaine kingpins and meth kingpins who have been part of these giant drug cartels can all of a sudden ply their trade legally, and that's going to somehow lead to the criminal element taking over the system. But I mean, if you've served your time, you've paid your debt to society, and as long as you're going about things legally, then I don't see what the problem is.
Agreed. So that's a yes for you?
That's a big yes for me.
Big yes on 64.
Big yes.
Go ahead. Do the thing.
It's a yes on 64. I tried like a half smile. It still feels so
It's weird.
gross.
This could be the swing.
This could be it right here. Yes on 64.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can I mention one more thing that I think
Yes,
is awesome about
absolutely.
Proposition 64? There is language in the proposition to start protecting appellations for marijuana, which I think is a really interesting direction that it might be going.
Can you educate me when you say appellations?
Appellations, like one would think of in wine, right? If you're drinking champagne, it has to come from the Champagne region
this is
of
a
France.
Humboldt.
Like
Yes,
This is a
exactly.
Humboldt marijuana.
APPELL.
No, absolutely.
Not
It's-
the mountain.
Not the mountains.
Yeah.
I started
exactly.
there too.
Appellations.
I had to-
Appellations.
I went on that journey.
I mean, you think about the wine culture as it exists, not just worldwide, but in California specifically. And wine fundamentally is an intoxicant, right? That's how,
Yes.
I mean, granted, it's been around a lot longer. But I mean, we could be sitting at the start of an era where, someday, years from now, you might sit down for dinner and you order a nice 2016 Mendocino, with your dessert, which would be a pile of Rice Krispie treats sprinkled with Cheez-Its.
What an excellent server. Sold.
Yeah.
That's great. That was a great pitch.
But I think
Well,
that's
thank
a really interesting, if you start thinking about maybe the trade going in that direction and becoming more craft, as everything in California does, and organic and appellation protected, it could be kind of a neat thing that we're moving towards.
Yeah, I like it.
California marijuana.
Is that an Orson Welles reference?
Yeah.
I love it. So
I
proposition.
thought that was an old prospector.